I used to think self-improvement was all about adding things. More discipline, more knowledge, more notches on my belt of achievements. I honestly thought that if I just kept building myself up, brick by brick, I'd eventually create a version of myself that was bulletproof, happy, but I was dead wrong. The biggest transformation of my life didn't come from adding anything at all. It came from subtracting, from letting go. It came from allowing the person I thought I was to just completely fall apart. This is the story of how I let my ego die and the shocking, sometimes terrifying, breakthroughs that came after. It's the raw story of what it's really like to dissolve your identity and find out what's waiting on the other side. Section 1. The Descent. For most of my life, my ego was the architect and I was the construction site. Every single day I'd wake up and add another brick to this tower of my identity. This tower was built with the approval of others, with my job title, my accomplishments, the numbers in my bank account, all of it held together by the carefully curated image I showed the world. And from the outside it looked impressive. By any conventional measure, I was successful. I was a high achiever, a problem solver, the guy people came to for answers. I was always moving, always climbing, always becoming. But inside that tower, it was a prison. The silence was deafening, filled with this low-grade anxiety that never ever went away. I was both the warden and the only inmate. Every single interaction was a performance. Every conversation was a subtle calculation to protect my status and prop up my sense of self. I was terrified of failure. Not because of the actual consequences, but because failure threatened the very foundation of who I thought I was. A crack in my list of achievements felt like a crack in my identity. Criticism wasn't just feedback. It felt like an existential threat. I remember walking down the street and my mind would instantly start categorizing and judging people. It was this quiet, internal monologue that was all designed to make me feel a little bit superior, a little bit safer. It was a defense mechanism, a way to prop up a building that was secretly fragile. And the crazy part is, my ego told me this was strength, that this constant vigilance was just the price of success. In reality, it was a special kind of self-inflicted torture. Every time my mind put someone else down, it was just showing its own deep-seated insecurity. My whole life was this frantic, exhausting effort to keep a house of cards from falling over. I was addicted to the next hit of validation, the next promotion, the next compliment. But the satisfaction never lasted. It was a treadmill of approval. As soon as I got what I wanted, the goalposts would just move further away. The recognition itself wasn't the problem. The problem was that, deep down, I didn't feel like I was good enough without it. I was living as if the entire world revolved around me, where my version of reality was the only one that mattered. This created a profound sense of loneliness. I felt disconnected from my friends, from my family, from myself. It felt like I was watching my own life from the outside, just playing a character I'd invented. And the most painful part? I knew it was a facade. I had all the things that were supposed to make you happy, but I just felt hollow. I was trapped in a life designed by a ghost, the ghost of who I thought I was supposed to be. And this constant striving, this desperate need to be someone, that was the very source of all my suffering. I just didn't know it yet. Have you ever felt that? Trapped by the identity you've built? Like you're playing a role instead of actually living? Let me know down in the comments. Section 2. The Catalyst. So what finally broke me? It wasn't one big, dramatic moment. There was no lightning strike, no near-death experience. It was something way more common, and maybe even more destructive, a complete and total burnout. The tower I'd spent my entire life building just got too heavy to hold up. It started with a few professional setbacks. A project I poured my soul into failed spectacularly. A promotion I was sure I had in the bag went to someone else. For the first time, the external validation I depended on for my self-worth just dried up. My ego, which had feasted on success, was now starving. And when it got hungry, it turned on me. The inner voice that used to cheer me on was now relentless, telling me I was stupid, that I was a failure, that I was letting everybody down. This crisis at work started bleeding into my personal life. The constant stress made me irritable and distant. Relationships I really valued started to fray. I felt this overwhelming shame, this deep fear of letting people see the weakness I felt inside, so I isolated myself. I figured if I couldn't be the successful, put-together person everyone expected, it was better to be no one at all. And then I just hit a wall. I was profoundly, completely exhausted. I was tired of the performance, tired of striving, tired of feeling like an imposter. I'd reached a dead end. But right there, in that dead end, in that space of total defeat, that's where something new finally had a little space to breathe. I remember one night just sitting in my quiet apartment, and the silence was just making the noise in my head feel louder. I had nothing left to strive for, no energy left to pretend. The house of cards had finally collapsed. In that moment of surrender, a question just surfaced, so clear and simple. Who am I without my achievements? Who am I without my job title, my successes, my failures? The question terrified me because I had no answer. My entire life, I was just a collection of stories and beliefs. If you take all that away, what's left? This was the turning point. I realized my strategy of always adding more was never going to work. The problem wasn't a missing piece. The problem was the whole structure. The very ego that I identified with, the I that was feeling all this pain, was the source of the pain itself. I realized I couldn't think my way out of this. The very tool I was using, my own mind, my ego, was the one that built the prison. I had to stop trying, I just had to let go. Section 3, the experience. Letting go wasn't a passive act. It was the most active and terrifying thing I have ever done. It was a slow, often painful, peeling away of the layers of identity I had mistaken for myself. It wasn't something that happened overnight, but it began with the simple, yet profound, practice of mindfulness and meditation. For the first time, I just started to sit with my own mind and actually watch it without judgment. I'd watch these thoughts of anxiety, fear, and self-criticism bubble up. But instead of getting caught in them, instead of believing they were me, I learned to see them as just thoughts, like clouds passing in the sky of my awareness. The ego is really just a collection of thoughts and beliefs that pretends to be a solid thing through sheer habit. By just observing it, a little bit of space opened up, a space between me, the observer, and the thoughts themselves. In that space, I found a sliver of freedom. I started a process of radical self-inquiry. I kept a journal, and every time I felt defensive or jealous or prideful, I'd write it down. And I'd ask myself, what part of me feels threatened right now? What story am I trying to defend? At first, this was excruciating. It showed me just how deeply my ego was attached to things, to being right, to being seen as smart, to being competent. Each one was a thread in the fabric of my identity, and letting them go felt like I was unraveling myself. The most intense part of the journey, what some might call ego death, didn't come in a dramatic flash, but in a moment of profound stillness. After months of this deconstruction, I was meditating one morning. I wasn't trying to achieve anything. Just sitting, breathing, watching. And then suddenly the relentless narrator in my head, the voice that had been chattering my entire life, just went silent. In that silence, the feeling of being a separate I inside my head completely dissolved. It wasn't that I was gone. It was that the boundary between myself and everything else just disappeared. There was no me looking out at the world. There was just the world. The sounds of birds outside, the feeling of the air on my skin, the light coming through the window. It was all one seamless, unified experience. There was no thinker, only thinking. No feeler, only feeling. It was a feeling of total interconnection, like being a single drop of water that suddenly realizes it's also the entire ocean. For a moment that felt like an eternity, the fear, the striving, the burden of being me, it was just gone. It was replaced by a sense of peace that is truly impossible to describe with words. It was both terrifying and beautiful. Terrifying because the me I knew had vanished, and beautiful because what was left was just pure, untroubled awareness. This peak experience was temporary. The sense of self, the ego, did eventually return, but it was different. It had been seen for what it was. A construct, a useful tool for navigating the world, but not the truth of who I am. The shadow had been recognized as a shadow, and it no longer had the same power. The house of cards had fallen, and I knew now that I wasn't the cards, but the space in which they stood. Section 4, the aftermath and rebuilding. Coming out of an experience like that leaves you in a weird place. It's disorienting. The old identity is gone, but a new one isn't really there yet. The immediate aftermath was a period of intense soul-searching and figuring out how to live again. The question wasn't just, who am I? Anymore, it was, how do I live from this new place of awareness? The first thing I noticed was just this incredible lightness. The heavy load of maintaining a persona, of defending an identity, was just gone. Life started to feel less like a performance and more like a direct experience. My actions became more spontaneous, more authentic, because they weren't being filtered through the neurotic self-concern that used to dominate every moment. So rebuilding wasn't about constructing a new, better ego. It was about learning to live without my entire identity being latched onto it. I started small. I made it a point to just notice and state simple preferences. I like this sauce. I enjoy walking at this time of day. It sounds so trivial, but by declaring these simple, honest truths, I was grounding myself in a new sense of self, one built from genuine feeling, not external validation. And my values? They did a complete 180. The hunger for status and approval was replaced by a deep desire for connection and contribution. I started practicing genuine vulnerability. I admitted when I was wrong. I asked for help when I needed it. I shared my fears openly. And instead of making me weaker, this vulnerability became my greatest strength. It dismantled the old defenses and allowed for real, authentic connections with other people. My relationships completely transformed. Before, I saw everyone through the lens of my own needs and insecurities. Now I could actually listen. When disagreements came up, my goal wasn't to be right anymore. It was to understand. I started making a conscious effort to praise other people, shifting my focus from propping myself up to genuinely supporting them. Now, this wasn't some magic pill that made life perfect. There are still days when the old ego patterns try to creep back in, the need to be right, the sting of criticism, the fear of not being enough. The difference is that now I can see them for what they are. I can see the ego trying to grab the steering wheel again, and I can choose not to identify with it. I can watch its reactions with a bit of compassion and just let them pass. So what is life like now? It's not like I don't have an ego anymore. You still need one to function in the world. You have a name, a personality, a history. The goal isn't to get rid of the ego. The goal is to change your relationship with it. It's the difference between being a character in a movie and being the awareness that's watching the movie. The ego is no longer the master. It's become a tool. The constant, frantic need to protect and defend myself has been replaced by a quiet sense of peace. There's a deep knowing that my worth isn't tied to my achievements or what other people think of me. Life is no longer a problem to be solved or a battle to be won. It's an experience to be lived, moment by moment. The desperate search for happiness outside of myself has ended, because I realized that what I was searching for was the very awareness that was doing the searching all along. This journey of letting go has been the most challenging and rewarding of my life. It was a death, yes, but it was also a rebirth. It was a stripping away of everything that wasn't me, only to find a truth that was always there, waiting just underneath. If you feel trapped by your own identity, burdened by the need to be someone, please know that there is another way. The path isn't about becoming a better version of yourself. It's about letting go of the self you think you are, to discover the freedom of who you already are. It's terrifying, but it's also the ultimate liberation. Thank you for watching this journey unfold. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more content on living a more authentic life. And I highly recommend you watch my other video on the practical, daily habits that support this new way of being.